Ariel Castro was born on the 10th of July 1960. He grew up in what can only be described as a chaotic environment. In total, he had 9 siblings, which included half-brothers and sisters. His parents divorced when he was a child and was shifted from one parent to another and lived with his grandmother at one point. In later interrogations, he has claimed that as a child, he was molested by an older boy, but this cannot be corroborated as there were no charges filed with the police. In 1970, he moved to the United States with his mother and 3 of his biological siblings. In the 1980s, his family had moved to Ohio, Cleveland, where he fell in love with the girl across the street, named Grimilda Figueroa. She soon became pregnant with his child, and their families decided that they had to get married. By the age of 22, he was married to her, and the couple moved into a 2-story home at 2207 Seymour Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio. He was well known around the neighborhood as the school bus driver and as a talented musician. He played the bass guitar for a local band. But what was supposed to be the couple's happily ever after soon turned into a nightmare as Castro started to beat Grimilda, breaking her nose on 2 separate occasions, and another time he knocked out one of her teeth. He also dislocated her left shoulder, then her right shoulder, and another time he threw her down the stairs, which resulted in a cracked skull. It is believed that he is responsible for a blood clot on her brain that resulted in a brain tumor. In 1993, Castro was arrested for domestic violence, but the case was soon dropped after he threatened his wife. Even by then, he had installed padlocks on the doors which he used to trap her inside the house when he went out to play music. His wife eventually left him for another man in 1995, but he would continue to stalk her for years afterwards, and even tried running over her new boyfriend with his car. He also regularly got into trouble at work, once for making an illegal U-turn with a bus full of kids, and another time he abandoned his bus driving duties and walked home to take a nap. He met Lillian Roldan in 2000 at a friend's house. He was playing bass, and she found him quite charming. Even though she was 20 and he was 40, she thought he was well-dressed and attractive. The two fell in love almost instantly and soon began dating. On the 2nd of August 2002, Michelle Knight was 21 years old and was on her way to court for a custody hearing about her 1-year-old son when she asked Castro for directions. He said that he would drop her there, and because she knew him, she accepted. She was a friend of his oldest daughter, Angie, and had seen him many times before. He then took her to his home, saying that he had to feed some newborn puppies that he found. Thinking that she could adopt one of the puppies, she went with him. Once inside, he took her upstairs and told her that she was not allowed to leave. Michelle was barely 5 feet tall. There was no way that she would be able to fight him off. She dropped to the floor in tears as he hogtied her with extension cord by her hands, feet, and neck. He pleasured himself and ejaculated on her clothing. Michelle later recalled that he hung her up like a fish. The next day he let her down and then proceeded to have his way with her. Afterwards, he took her to the basement where he tied her up with a chain, clamped it with a padlock, and placed duct tape over her mouth and her hands, and then kept her locked down there for days. It was later discovered that his girlfriend, Lillian, would spend nights at his home while Michelle was locked in the basement, which was locked with a large padlock. When she asked him about the lock, he would tell her that he kept his cash in the basement. When Michelle's mother reported her missing, the police thought she had run away out of anger for losing custody of her son, so very little effort was made to find her. Because he originally wanted a teenage victim, a few months into her abduction, Castro forced her to dig a grave in his backyard and then tried to strangle her. He stopped at the last minute, unable to go through with it. He eventually moved her into a room upstairs where he chained her around her waist to the radiator on the wall. For Michelle, the worst part of being bound and tied up for days and weeks at a time, without companionship, without any hope of rescue, was the boredom. He would sometimes disappear for days, leaving her tied up with only a mattress and a small bin to use as a toilet. So when he allowed her to have a small television, she couldn't help but feel grateful. For Castro, the television was more than just a gift. It was a means to control her. He used it to get her to comply with his every command, threatening to take it away if she ever disobeyed or tried to escape. The television became her lifeline, her only connection to the outside world. So this threat terrified her, and eventually she stopped resisting. A few weeks into her capture, Castro had his girlfriend Lillian over one day when she heard the sound of a television playing upstairs and asked him about it since she didn't think there was anyone in the house. It was a close call, Castro later admitted to police. My heart started beating. After that, Lillian received a letter from Castro in which he said that he loved her, but not enough to keep the relationship going. He told her to call him if she ever needed help, but that they were no longer a couple. On the 21st of April, 2003, it was the day before Amanda Berry's birthday. She had just finished her shift at Burger King and called her boyfriend to ask if he could come pick her up. She received no answer, so she decided to walk home. She had seen an older man smile at her when he was parked nearby, with a young girl in the passenger seat. They both looked familiar. She had walked for about 5 minutes when the same van stopped next to her and asked if she wanted a ride home. My son also works at Burger King, he said. Anthony Castro. Do you know him? Instantly, she feels more relaxed. She knows Anthony. He was at her home once. She tells him that she used to attend school with Anthony's sister, Angie, and asks how she is doing. She's good, he says. She's at home right now. Would you like to go see her? She did not really want to go home yet, so she says, okay. When they get to the house, he asks to see her new phone and she hands it to him, then leads her into his home and says that Angie is taking a bath and will be out soon. While you're here, let me show you around the house, he says, and leads her up the stairs. He stops at a door and tells her, my roommate is asleep in that room. Have a look. There is a hole drilled into the door, and through it she can see a girl sleeping and a television playing in the background. He then walks her through a large bedroom which leads to a smaller room. When she turns back to leave, he blocks her exit and says, pull down your pants. The words came as such a surprise to her that she couldn't believe what she just heard. No, take me home, she shouts at him. He orders her again, take off your pants. Make any noise and I will hurt you. She starts to cry while doing what he asked. Standing there with her jeans around her ankles, she thinks to herself, why didn't I see this coming? Just because I know his kids does not mean I should have gone with him to his house. He opened his pants and starts playing with himself. She found him disgusting and stares at the walls when he suddenly stops and tells her that he will take her home. She pulls up her pants, still crying, and proceeds to walk through the large bedroom towards the door when he says, take off your pants and get on the bed. Not knowing what to do, she shouts at him, if you don't take me home right now, I'm going to call the police. She knows that he still has her phone. He then drags her to the bed and proceeds to force himself on her. And when he is done, he tells her again to get dressed so that he can take her home. She knows he is lying. He then ties her hands and her mouth with duct tape and places a motorcycle helmet over her head. This is just so that I can carry you to the van, he says, to take you home. She knows he is lying, but still has hope. He carries her down into the basement where he sits her down on the bare concrete with her back up against a load-bearing pole. He takes out a thick chain and ties it around her stomach, around the pole, and secures it with a padlock. He removes the helmet and tells her, be quiet, don't scream, then leaves her. She manages to bring her hands to her mouth to remove the tape and then bite through the tape on her wrists. Then she starts shouting as loud as she can, help me, please, someone help me. He's going to come back and kill me. She struggled and tried her best to slip out from the chain, but it was wrapped too tightly. When he came back the following day, he had some burgers with him. After feeding her, he carried her upstairs where he strips both of them naked and gets in the shower with her and proceeded to wash her and shampoos her hair as if she was a baby. She is disgusted by his touch and wants to run away, but he has her trapped. When they get out of the shower, he dresses her in some of his clothes and locks her up in the basement again. She then remembers that it is her birthday and starts to cry. On that night, he receives a phone call from his ex-girlfriend, who tells him that she needs his help. When she came over, he met her in the driveway. She told him that her mother had just died in Puerto Rico and that she needed money to fly there. He made her wait outside while he went inside to get her $1,000. She did manage to pay him back, but he never saw her again. After 2 nights of non-stop screaming, Amanda's voice was gone. Her throat was sore and she could barely make a sound. By then, she had given up hope of being heard by anyone. It was later revealed that Castro had used bricks and cement to build extra walls in the basement to make sure that it was soundproof. He would also leave the radio in the lounge playing loudly throughout the day when he went out. On the 3rd day, she was moved upstairs into the larger bedroom where he had violated her. The chain was still wrapped around her waist, but this time he tied the other end to a radiator on the wall. He kept it just long enough for her to reach the mattress on the floor that had no sheets. There was a small window on the other side of the room that was boarded up and covered with heavy gray curtains. She could not reach it, or the overhead light switch that she could have used to signal to neighbors. Next to the mattress, he placed a small rubbish bin that she had to use as a toilet. She was kept in darkness all day until he returned home after work. She wondered how he was getting away with this. Why isn't his roommate in the other room helping her? When he left during the day, he left the radio on downstairs at such a loud volume that it gave her a constant headache. She was only fed once a day, usually a burger and fries or a few slices of pizza or some candy bars. He never removed the chains, not even when he forced himself on her. Occasionally, he would ask her if she would like to come downstairs to watch television with him. He disgusted her, but she just wanted to be out of that room and out of those chains, so she would say yes, while avoiding eye contact with him. When they passed the roommate's door, it was always closed. Because Amanda was not an adult yet, there was a lot of media attention given to her case, and he seemed to enjoy watching her case being covered while she was with him. She used to cry when she saw her family on the news begging for her safe return. It used to give her hope that soon the police would break down the front door to save her, but rescue never came. "Your mom looks really upset," he says. There is no sympathy in his voice. He then flips around the channels looking for other news reports about her and finds them on Channel 8 and Channel 3. He can't take his eyes off the TV. He seems to love the attention. After a week, he even used Amanda's cell phone to call her mother to tell her that Amanda is in love with him now and that they should stop looking for her. The FBI tried tracing the call, but all they could determine was that the call was made within a few blocks of their home. According to the journal that Amanda has kept, within the first week he had violated her at least 25 times. It has been 4 or 5 times a day. She writes, "He slobbers on my face and is obsessed with my breasts. He's always touching my chest and telling me, 'These boobs are mine.' I am learning that the more it hurts me, the more he likes it, and that it's over quicker when I don't fight. What would be the point anyway? I'm chained to a radiator, so where could I go?" In her journal, she has marked an X every time that he violates her because she figures that when he is caught one day, that he should be held accountable for each and every time. But eventually there were so many marks that just seeing them took her right back to the memories of every time that it happened. So after a few weeks, she stopped marking them. She was allowed to clean herself and brush her teeth in the downstairs bathroom once a week, which became the highlight of her week. One day she saw the news reports of Elizabeth Smart on the news, the girl who was held captive for months and was eventually rescued, and it gave her hope. She also noticed that reports about her own disappearance was getting less and less until one day it had stopped. She searched every channel, but all she noticed was a news story about lettuce that were making people sick. Her heart sank and she thought that it meant that the world had given up on finding her. When she asked Castro when she would be going home, he kept saying things like, "Maybe next week," Then it was next month. Then 3 more months, which gave her hope but would eventually just lead to more disappointment. It was 2 months later when he unchained her to help him do laundry and to clean up the place. When he took her into the roommate's room to clean up. The room was filled with food wrappers, pizza boxes, and with napkins strewn all over the floor. That was when she and Michelle saw each other for the first time. Amanda noticed that Michelle is also chained around her waist when they are introduced to each other. They say hi to each other and not a single word more. Michelle had seen her on the news. The coverage had been constant. Her parents, her family, the whole neighborhood has been on the local news calling for Amanda Berry's safe return, while she has been there for almost a year, while no one seems to have noticed that she is missing. She spent her days in bed, depressed and unable to get up, and seems to have lost the will to live. In August 2003, Amanda writes in her journal, "He wakes me up again. It's whatever he wants, whenever he wants it. Even after 4 months, it's still 3 or 4 times a day. My strategy has become, don't fight, don't make him mad, do whatever I have to do to stay alive and get home. But now he is making me lie on my stomach while he does that really nasty thing again. It hurts so bad. How would he like it if somebody stuck something into him that way? It's horrible and he won't stop. I can't help it, so I scream, 'Let me go home or kill me.' He stops, sits me up and looks at me funny. 'Do you want to die?' he finally asks. 'No, but I don't want to be here.' He just looks at me for a while and then quietly says, 'Okay.' He then leaves the room and returns with an old vacuum cleaner. He wraps the electric cord around her neck and squeezes it. She is calm and is ready to die when suddenly he stops. He throws the cord on the floor and screams, 'I don't want to kill you. You are only here because of my sexual problem.' Then he storms off. This is not the last that we will hear about his problem. While they were locked up during the day, she and Michelle never called out to each other, mainly because Castro would sometimes pretend to leave, and if they made any noise, he would come bursting through the door and would beat them and threaten to kill them. He was constantly testing them, and the music was always blasting through the house. They never knew when he was home and when he was pretending to be gone. He would also burst through the door and start shouting at them, saying that the other girl told him that they were making a lot of noise during the day, then threatened to take away their television. So now they not only had to look out for when he was around, they started to grow wary of the girl in the next room, the girl that would tell on them if they made any noise, which were lies, of course, but they didn't know that. By Amanda's first year, which was Michelle's second year, the two girls had seen each other about 10 times, and that was usually when he had both of them downstairs to clean up the place. During one of those cleaning sessions, he briefly left the room. That's when Amanda says to Michelle, "I'm Amanda Berry," to which Michelle replied, "I know who you are, I've seen you on the news." At that moment, Castro returned to separate the two girls. He did not want them talking to each other. On Friday the 2nd of April 2004, Castro was on his way to pick his daughter up from school when he noticed her walking with a friend. Gina de Jesus was 14 years old when she and Arlene Castro planned to have a sleepover at Gina's home. Gina gave Arlene 50 cents to call her mom to ask if she could go home with Gina. Her mom said no, so the two girls hugged, said goodbye, and parted ways. The 50 cents was supposed to be for Gina to take the city bus home, but now she had to walk home. A few minutes later, Castro pulls up beside Gina to ask if she knew where his daughter was and if she could help him go and look for her. She knew that he was Arlene's dad. He was friends with her father, and her uncle played music in a band with him. When she got into the car, he drove straight to his home. Arlene went that way, she says, but he says that he needs to go pick up some money at his home first. When he gets there, he parks the car around the back and goes into the house. He returns shortly after and says that he needs her help to load some speakers into his car. When she gets inside, he tells her to wait in the kitchen while he goes into the bathroom, which is right off the kitchen. A minute passes and he emerges from the bathroom and walks right up to her and tries to grab her breasts, which causes her to freak out. "What are you doing?" she screams. "Don't! I want to get out of here!" He tells her, "Okay, but you have to go through the house and down the stairs to go out the front," and leads her down to the basement stairs. She is halfway down when she realizes that this is not the right way, when he grabs her and pushes her up against the steel pole. He then grabs a chain and wraps it around her neck and across her stomach and locks it in place. He forces her into a sitting position while he grabs a filthy rag off the floor and pushes it into her mouth and completes the binding with some duct tape. She's panicking now and trying very hard not to cry. She has to get out of here, she's thinking. She has to come up with an escape plan. That's when he pulls down his pants and starts doing things to himself. "Please, God, please don't let him do this to me," she prays. When he's done, he pulls up his pants and without saying a word walks upstairs. Even with her mouth gagged, she's still screaming and trying to make as much noise as she can, and crying. She never thought that she could cry this much. When he comes down the next day, she is paralyzed with fear as he pulls the tape off her mouth. He pulls out the rag and holds it up for her to see. "If you scream, this goes right back in." He offers her some rice and beans, but she refuses even though she is starving. "Okay," he says, "I don't care if you starve," and disappears up the stairs. What's wrong with these neighbors, she thinks. Why can't they hear me? Surely the police are looking for me by now. Why is Arlene's dad doing this to me? When he comes back down a day later with some McDonald's, she cannot help but accept. She avoids looking at him as she eats. He unties her chains and she can breathe better, but when he stands her up, her legs are weak and shaky from sitting on the hard concrete for so long. He would take her upstairs to the lounge to watch news reports of her disappearance, which was where she heard that her disappearance was linked to Amanda Berry. After a few days, she asked him if he was the one that took Amanda. At first he denied it, but he could see how terrified she was. She was thinking that he killed her. Then he takes her upstairs and opens a door to show her that Amanda is alive. She has her back towards them and does not see her. "I've got another one too," he says proudly, then shows her by opening and shutting the other door. Michelle was sleeping as always. Gina hated being kept in the dark, stuffy basement, so she asked if he had a room for her. 2 days later, he comes down into the basement and tells her that her room is ready. For himself, he had a bed in the lounge at that time. The bottom of the stairs was draped with a heavy curtain, as well as the entrance to the kitchen, so you never knew if he was standing just behind the next curtain as you moved from one area to the next. He would sometimes even have guests over, but they were mostly kept in the kitchen. Very rarely was anyone allowed to enter the rest of the house, and the music was always blasting through the hallways at full volume. Gina was held captive for more than a month when one day her door and Amanda's door were open at the same time when they both waved to each other. A week later, he brought Gina downstairs and allowed her to do Michelle's hair. He told Gina to tell Michelle that she was his daughter, but when he left them alone for a few minutes, she whispered, "I'm not really his daughter. I'm Gina De Jesus." Michelle replied, "I know, I've seen you on the news." A few days later, he asked Gina if she wanted to watch a TV show about her disappearance. He then took her to Amanda's room where the three of them watched it on VHS.
This is Tom Morris with one of our most mysterious missing child cases. It started at this Cleveland middle school 1 year ago today. 14-year-old Gina De Jesus left school and started walking down this busy Cleveland street. She never made it home. Gina vanished in broad daylight.
When I came home and I got on the phone, and from 4 o'clock I started calling friends after friends, and they said they did not see her.
The show featured both of their parents talking about how hard life has been without their daughters. He seemed to enjoy watching, but it only made the girls cry. According to Gina, the things she missed most were simple things, like being able to go to the fridge whenever you feel thirsty or hungry, She missed spending time with her friends and playing pranks and laughing with her family. Gina was tied to the radiator with a chain and padlock that was wrapped around her waist, which left her bruised and in constant pain. One day, she asked him to put it on her ankle instead, and he agreed. He wrapped it around her ankle a few times and locked it with the padlock and then left the room. She thought about trying to slip it off. The music was playing loudly, so she couldn't tell if he was outside the door or if he was going downstairs. It always felt as if he was watching. He came in about an hour later to check if she had fiddled with the chain. "I need to know I can trust you," he says. "You know what I can do to you." He was constantly sneaking around outside their doors and would watch them through a hole he drilled into their doors, and if he saw anything he did not like, he would burst through the door and beat them. The threat was constant, which kept the girls in constant fear, and they were always terrified. One day while Gina and Michelle are downstairs, he walks in from the kitchen holding a gun. He opens it and loads it with one bullet, closes it and spins the barrel. Then he says, "Let's play a game. If I can hold the gun to your head and pull the trigger and nothing happens, then you can hold it to my head and pull the trigger." Michelle takes a few steps back, but Gina's heart is racing. She has had enough, and she stands her ground. "Okay, I'll play," she says. He stares at her, surprised. Then he points the gun at her head and pulls the trigger. Click. Nothing. Then he places the gun in her hands while holding it to his head. Gina does not hesitate. She is fantasizing about him lying on the floor dead while they make their escape. She pulls the trigger, and nothing happens. Now she was worried that they may get punished, but he said nothing and walked away. They did not know it at the time. The gun was not really loaded. He just wanted to see if they would pull the trigger. After Gina went missing, a composite sketch was released by the FBI that was based on a few students seeing a Latino man driving a white van in the area. Castro also became paranoid because there was a security camera in the area where she was taken, and the police were tracking down and searching people's homes that was spotted in the area on that day. He did not know at the time that the camera had broken down, so he wrote a confession for the police in which he stated that he was a sexual predator and blamed his hormonal instincts. The letter also said that he would take his own life. He placed this confession in a drawer in his home, which was only found 9 years later when he was arrested in 2013. He favored Gina, so when Gina fell into a deep depression, he decided to give her some company by moving Michelle into her room. Both of them were chained to the same radiator. From Amanda's journal, "Those two girls in the next room make it even harder to be here. They bug me, laughing and talking all the time. I can hear them through the door, and they actually joke with him like everything's okay. He tells me that they're nice to him and that they say I'm stuck up and won't talk to them when we are all together downstairs. He does treat them better. Lots of nights he takes them downstairs to watch movies, and I can hear them having fun. Sometimes he asks me to join them, but I think that's messed up. I can't feed his fantasy that we're a big happy family. He thinks I don't notice that he treats Gina and Michelle better. I see him going into their room and I'll bet he's bringing them things he's not giving to me. He treats them like friends but uses me for sex." Because both girls were taken in the same neighborhood, the cases were almost immediately connected, which caused their cases to resurface on the news regularly for the next 10 years. Castro would regularly mock Michelle by telling her that nobody cares about her, and that no one was looking for her, deriving some sick pleasure from her misery. In 2005, his ex-wife filed a restraining order against him to keep him away from their daughters. When the police knocked on his door to deliver a summons, no one answered. The girls never even knew anyone was knocking because of the loud music. Also in 2005, Sylvia Brown, the supposed psychic, appeared on the Montel Williams show and told Amanda's mother that she was dead. Amanda was hoping that Sylvia would be able to tell her mother where she was, but her heart broke when she saw her mother give up, believing that she was dead. Her mother died in 2006 of heart failure, not knowing what happened to her daughter. The first time Amanda really talks to the other girls is when Castro moved all three of them into the basement in 2006 because his daughters were getting curious about why they can't come over to see their old rooms, and his youngest daughter Emily was coming over to stay for a few days. He had told Gina and Michelle that Amanda does not like them, so they are surprised when she eventually says, "Hey, what are you watching? Is that a Will Smith movie?" "Yes," Gina says. Amanda replies, "He's so cute." "Yes," Gina replies. "He is cute. Does he also tell you guys not to watch movies with black people in it?" Gina nods, and they discuss what a horrible racist he is, how they're not allowed to listen to rap music, and make fun of how cheap he is. That's when Amanda discovers that he lied to her when he told her that he was not abusing Gina and Michelle. All this time she thought it was only her and that they were his friends. They tell each other how after he is done he throws money at them, which they must then use to pay him to bring food back for them. Amanda writes in her journal, "I realize now what he's been doing. He lies to them about me, and he lies to me about them. That's his way of dividing us and making sure we don't trust one another." When his daughter comes in by the kitchen door the next day, they can hear that it's Arlene. "That's my friend," Gina whispers. Then she says what they're all thinking. "What if we scream?" "It's too risky," says Amanda. "He's smart, and Arlene is only 14. I'm sure he could come up with some story. He could tell her, 'Oh, my girlfriend is downstairs with her friends and they're just messing around.' He could think of some lie that Arlene would believe. He is that clever. I've seen it. He doesn't make mistakes. He seems like a nice, normal, middle-aged, friendly guy. He doesn't look crazy. That's how he gets away with this. He hides in plain sight. He says he can get away with anything, including killing us. If his daughter found out about us, how do we know he wouldn't do something terrible to her to protect himself?" As she is telling Gina and Michelle all of this, she is also thinking that she doesn't know that she can trust them yet. What if they scream and the two of them tell him that it was her idea? Then he might kill only her. "I think we should stay quiet," Amanda says. "It's too dangerous." They all agree. In the meantime, it sounds as if they were having fun upstairs. After an hour, they hear Arlene leave. Then he comes down into the basement in a good mood. "They're gone," he says. "You can watch TV now if you want." He's talking a lot, which usually means he's happy. "Rosie wanted to see the basement, but I made up a lie," he says. "I told her I couldn't find the key, and it was a mess down there anyway." He's so proud of himself. His family came over to stay at the house a few more days after, so he moved the three of them into his van where he kept them chained to the seats. A week later, when everyone was gone, he moved them back upstairs. Except this time, he moved Amanda in the large room and Michelle and Gina into the smaller room and chained their ankles together through a hole in the wall. The three girls had promised each other that they would never discuss what they talked about with him, but somehow he always knew what they talked about. He once barged into Amanda's room and slapped her across the face, confronting her about an escape attempt that only Gina and Michelle knew about. Then he took away her television, her radio, and her fan. He also told the other girls things that only Amanda knew about and told them that Amanda had snitched on them. We don't know for sure how he knew this, but it is possible that he had some sort of listening devices implanted in their rooms. So, tensions were always high. No one knew who to trust, which is how he managed to keep them from teaming up against him. Michelle had become pregnant a total of 5 times during her capture, and each time he would savagely beat her with a barbell, he would starve her, and even throw her down the stairs to force her to miscarry. But when Amanda got pregnant in 2007, he decided to keep it, and he forced Michelle to deliver the baby inside a plastic swimming pool. He told her that if the baby dies, then so do you. When the baby wasn't breathing, Michelle performed CPR on it, saving the baby's life. It was a girl who Amanda named Jocelyn. After Amanda gave birth, he started to treat her better. She was not chained up anymore, but he did keep the door locked. And to keep her obedient, he would continue to test her by leaving doors open to see if she would try and get away. He once allowed her to get all the way down the stairs before popping out from behind a curtain to beat her. Meanwhile, Michelle had grown very protective over Gina and would frequently try to take beatings and abuse on her behalf. He would also use the sexual abuse to pit the girls against each other. He would tell Michelle that Amanda is not in the mood tonight, so you have to take her place, making Michelle wonder why Amanda had the right to say that she wasn't in the mood yet. She, Michelle, was forced to perform vile acts and not given the right to say no. Ariel Castro was regularly seen with his daughter outside the house. He used to take her to the mall, to the park, and to church. When people asked him who she was, he would tell them that she was his girlfriend's daughter. Jocelyn was free to roam about the house. When she grew older, she started to ask him questions about why Michelle and Gina were being kept in chains. So he started to remove them when she was around and allowed the girls some freedom around the house. But this was always under supervision by him, and he would always have the gun on him and keep some doors locked. One day he left the house and forgot to lock the front door. That's when Jocelyn goes upstairs and says to Amanda, "Mommy, Daddy is not in the house." She tells her to go look for him in the kitchen or by the garage. The little girl comes back later and tells her that she can't find Daddy anywhere. Her heart is racing, wondering, is this a trick? Is he hiding somewhere ready to pounce and beat her? She decides to take the risk, knowing that he would kill her if he knew what she was planning. Every door she opens, every corner she takes, she expects him to be there waiting. She is so scared, but she's had enough of the abuse and makes it all the way to the front door, which she manages to open. But when she tries the screen door, it's locked. Her heart sinks. She has made it this far. She's not about to give up, so she bangs on it with all of her strength, terrified that Castro might pull into the driveway at any moment. She manages to pry it open a few inches, just enough to get a hand through. She is now shouting for anyone who is out there and sticks her arm through the gap in the door, waving it frantically, trying to alert anyone. "Please, please, anyone, please help me," she pleads. That is when neighbors see the arm, and they approach curiously to ask her what is wrong. "I've been kidnapped," she says. "Please, he might be back at any moment. My name is Amanda Berry. I am being held here against my will. Please help me." Neighbors manage to break the bottom part of the door so she can crawl through. Once outside, she is still terrified that Castro might return to take her away. And she goes to one of the neighbors and asks to call the police. Someone hands her a smartphone, but she has never seen a touchscreen phone before, having been locked away for 10 years. Finally, she gets through to the police.
You need police, fire, or ambulance?
I'm the police.
Okay, and
I'm Amanda Berry. I'm here. I'm free now.
Okay, stay there with those neighbors.
Following the escape, police swarmed the area, then broke down the door to the house. When they got upstairs to discover Gina and Michelle, Officer Barbara Johnson, who was one of the first on the scene, recalls finding Michelle Knight and Georgina De Jesus after hearing the pitter-patter of footsteps in a dark room.
Michelle Knight, as she literally launched herself into Officer Spada's arms. He legs, arms, just choking him, and she just kept repeating, "You saved us, you saved us."
Johnson said the kidnapping victims were scared, pale, talkative, and did not want to be left alone. Castro was arrested a few hours later when police found him in the passenger seat of his brother's car.
What do you have to say to those women? How could you do that?
Police initially arrested both his brothers, but they were quickly cleared and released. During one interview, Angie Castro, who was Michelle's friend, noted that just a few months earlier, she had spent several hours in the living room of this house helping her father set up his Facebook account, while Amanda, Gina, Michelle, and Jocelyn were locked away upstairs. She wished there had been a clue, a noise, a creak, a cry, anything that would have made her suspect that something was wrong.
Everything's making sense now. It's all adding up. And I'm disgusted. I'm horrified.
Her mother had died the year before, and now she realized her father wasn't who she thought he was. Castro's whole family disowned him and cut him off completely. Ariel Castro pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to life imprisonment plus 1,000 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Although he admitted what he was doing was wrong, he tried to avoid taking responsibility by blaming his sexual problem.
I'm not a monster. I'm a normal person. I am just sick. I have an addiction. Just like an alcoholic has an addiction.
In one of the more breathtaking moments at his sentencing, the man who pleaded guilty to multiple counts of rape said this about his victims.
Most of the sex that went on in the house, and probably all of it, was consensual. Because there was times that they would even ask me for sex. Many times.
The only victim to appear, Michelle Knight, who said she spent, quote, 11 years in hell.
Days never got shorter. Days turns into nights. Nights turns into days. Years turn into eternity.
1 month into his life sentence, Castro had taken his own life by hanging himself with bedsheets in his prison cell. There was so much interest in the house that police had to build a security fence around it and have it guarded around the clock. People have driven from all over to see it, which caused constant traffic jams in the neighborhood. The house was eventually demolished. Amanda has gone on to co-author a book with Gina about their ordeal titled Hope, a Memoir of Survival in Cleveland, in which she wrote, "As a huge piece of heavy equipment with a giant mechanical claw rips off the front of the house, on TV, I can suddenly see right into the room where he kept me for so long. It's such a strange feeling. For so many years, I dreamed of smashing those walls, ripping the wood off those windows, anything to get out of there. Now I'm watching this big machine do it for me, taking just a few minutes to destroy what had been my whole world. I'm grateful that I will never see that house again." To cope and heal from the trauma, Michelle has also written books about her ordeal, which is called Finding Me, A Decade of Darkness. Despite their horrific circumstances, the women displayed remarkable strength and courage during their captivity. They formed a bond with each other, offering support and comfort in the face of unimaginable trauma. How many women and men are out there right now in a similar situation? We can't just go on saying, "It's not my problem." This case highlighted the importance of recognizing and responding to signs of abuse and exploitation.
Two days after finding freedom, Gina De Jesus went home.
It's a dream. I still pinch myself.
A shy and soft-spoken young woman, Gina found herself thrust into a spotlight she never wanted. Gina met the president and spread her message of hope.
What didn't change was my family's love for me. They never stopped looking for me.
Fast forward a few years, and now that's Gina's main mission, devoting her time to work with the Northeast Ohio Amber Alert Committee.
Just to give back and to help, like they helped me when I came home.
Helping with the U.S. Marshals Missing Children Unit. And her biggest success story to date, opening up the Cleveland Family Center for Missing Children and Adults.
Michelle Knight, now known as Lily Rose Lee, is hosting a fundraising event tonight to celebrate just how far she's come.
She's tapped into her passions, and one of them is rescuing animals. She's created a nonprofit called Unleashed Animal Rescue, and that's why when she's matching them to their new homes, it has to be a perfect fit.
There's a person that understands the animal that they're bringing into their home and is willing to work with them. You have to connect with that animal before they leave my home.
Rose told us that her rescue is a place where everyone can enjoy the animals, whether they choose to adopt or not.
Being married, my wedding was the most extraordinary and heartwarming, oh my gosh, explosive day ever. My healing is never done, but I love my life. I love where it's going. I love everything about it. It's just full of peace and joy.
10 years. It seems like yesterday, but it seems like I've lived a good life in 10 years. Like,
one of her biggest fears, being in the public eye, something she conquered the day she took her job on Fox 8.
I feel like this is like what I'm supposed to do. Like what I went through was to help the rest of the families that are going through it now, and I'm made for this. Like
now the hope that you've given other families, I mean, that has to make you feel really great.
I know, like when I would see myself, it would give me hope on TV. I'm like, I mean, I love doing what I do now with Fox 8, and I know that's something that I will continue to do as long as they let me.
You have found love.
Yes.
And you're happy.
I am happy. I thought I was gonna be a cat lady. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just always thought, like, you know, I don't know if I'm ever gonna be able to trust and love somebody and find somebody that I can trust them. This is my first like real boyfriend. Crazy at the age of 36 that I have my first real boyfriend in life, but it's nice to have a normal life sometimes.